Okay, we started. We should get some pizza. I warn you, probably gonna be a long one like last time.
You can get up and get pizza mid-meeting. It's okay.
But we're barring the door if you try to.
I don't know enough. It's from Main Street Pizza. Yeah, I'll get it later. We start to get hungry around 9:30. We're not done.
He's kidding. He's kidding.
Okay, so first up, I am Daniel Hubling. I'm president of the Neighborhood Association. Thank you for coming. We're going to do adoption of agenda. So everyone have an agenda? Something else? Any last minute things we need to add to this or changes? Good to this. No? Have a motion to adopt the agenda as it stands.
So moved. Second.
See a show of hands on the topic. Any opposed? Agenda is adopted. There were a couple things I needed to say, should say before that. We are recording the meeting tonight. So if anybody's in the witness protection program, it's in the back. Ultimately, this will go up on YouTube, so everybody else can see this whenever they want.
Oh, you're fine. Totally don't do
The other
that.
thing is, Cynthia may have already said this, is everyone signed in. Okay. This is important. We're going to have elections next month, and that's when we keep track of who's actually eligible to vote. Next thing is approval of the minutes from last month. Everybody read those, studied up on the minutes from last month. At the very least, you have a copy of the newsletter right now. Let's get over real quick. Yeah, they're great. Jackson did an excellent job. It was a long meeting.
I think you corrected half of it.
So we need to approve the minutes from last month. Do you have a motion on that?
Motion to approve.
Okay, see a show of hands on accepting minutes. Yay. Okay. Is there anyone here who it's their first time being here? Hey. Thanks for coming out. I don't want to put you on the spot too much. Tell us who you are and what brought you to a meeting. Why did you decide to come?
I'm Emily. It's my husband Steven. We've been in the neighborhood for, I don't know, 4 months or so, and we've been meaning to get to a meeting. We watched the last live stream, so we couldn't get here, but we finally had one day available. Okay.
Wow.
So there's such a group viewing online?
Yeah.
Enough to get here. Yes.
Oh, there it is. It's coming up.
Chris, are you? I'm new.
Yeah.
Introduce yourself and just tell us what about you.
I'm Chris Spilker. I moved here with my husband Sean at the beginning of the summer.
Okay, some brief announcements coming up. And I'm going to turn over to Jordan for a second. He's going to cover the first 3 days.
All right, I'm going to be really brief today, and I promise. There's 2 rebates that are currently out there that I would highly encourage people to take advantage of. One is the SAWS rebate for smart water meter sensors. So there's a company called Flume for $150. You buy the sensor, you attach it without having to call a plumber to your main water meter. It sends you alerts on your phone, so it can help detect leaks inside your house, make sure that you're maintaining your water budget. It helps you assign that for you. And then once you buy it, you submit it back to SAWS, and they'll give you $150 to as a rebate on your account. So essentially, the device costs you $50 in the end. Yes.
We looked it up, it wasn't $200.
The Flume device?
I'm not sure which device it was, but it was more than that.
I'll
check out.
Yeah, I can only speak to the one I'm using. That's Flume. It was $200, so it essentially cost me $50. Same thing with the Nest. The other end of this is the CPS has a $150 rebate, so you can buy a Nest at Walmart, I believe, for $200, and it's a Wi-Fi enabled thermostat. It's super easy to install. You can control your home's temperature when you're not there. Again, to submit for a rebate, they put $150 back on your account. So essentially for $100, you can have 2 devices that will help monitor either your AC system or light control remotely, or something to monitor your water usage and potentially help detect leaks. And we all know how important that is with the 100-year-old houses in this neighborhood. I personally feel like mine's a ticking time bomb, but this helps me figure out if something's going wrong. So that's it for the.
So may I comment on the Nest? That I have a Nest, and the way you get your rebate is you assign to CPS the ability to turn off your air conditioning system in peak times. So think about what peak times are. Maybe August 30th, maybe, when it's over 100 degrees. And so this is not a free $150. This is not just simply a rebate for you doing something smart. You're actually exchanging comfort during peak seasons, or peak times when you really want the comfort the most, in exchange for that $150. And so I have a Nest, and I chose not to get the rebate.
So, yes, and I apologize, I have some allergy issues today, so I'm a little cloudy. That is true. However, you can also override it at any time when they do go to do the peak hours usage. You can just turn it down from either your phone or from the device itself and says, are you sure you want to override? And it overrides it. What happens if you override those, you lose out, I think, on the $30 annual credit that's also assigned to your account, but they still cover the cost of your device. So you can't override it.
I will mention from personal experience, I'm not pushing you to do this, I'll just say we have that in our own home, and I couldn't tell the difference. Other than going to look like, oh, they turned it off right now. So I don't think you'll necessarily be sweltering because of this.
It's not for everyone, but if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I use both these devices. I'm a big smart device, smart gadget, smart home person. So if you have questions, let me know. Again, it may not be right for you, but at least it's out there. That's it.
Jordan, your strategic meeting?
So we have I'm very well prepared today. So we had the Beacon Hill survey results recently, right? We went through it. It was really interesting. At least I found it interesting. It was eye-opening. The next step from this is to have a strategic planning session so that we can sit down with the neighborhoods and go through the issues that were identified. Because what you guys have done by helping us with that survey is giving us a charge list on things that we should be addressing as a neighborhood. However, we don't necessarily know how we want to tackle these without having inclusive input. So we need a big, diverse group of people to help us decide how we are going to tackle these issues. You provided us with the questions. Now we're looking to you as a group to help us form the answers. So we're going to have it on Saturdays. One of the things we found in the survey was that our meeting dates can be somewhat difficult for people to attend these midweek meetings. So we wanted to have it on the Saturday. I believe it's from 10 to 1. And that's going to be across the street, that way, at the
Impact field.
The impact field, yeah. So it's a really neat, innovative space. It's really great for, it's a great setting for us to collaborate in. So we'll have big old post-it notes on the wall. We'll put up an issue like animal care, right? One of the things that we kept seeing on there was loose animals were a big issue. So we can talk about how we as a neighborhood can impact that. So we're really, really asking you to participate because completing the survey only gets us to 50% and we have to get to 100. So if you can make it out on September 21st from 10 to 1, it'd be greatly appreciated. Again, if you have any questions, I'm going to be here after the meeting, so please feel free to stop by and we can discuss it a little bit more.
The address, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot. The address and the time and all the details are in a newsletter. So if you have one at home, you have the info. If you don't have one at home, you can grab it on the way out. And we'll put in the event on Facebook as well.
All right. One thing just to mention, a lot of you were probably here last month, and Richard Keacock came to give an update on the status of the Bristol Bridge renovation. He mentioned this, I'm just going to think about this more. He offered the party room they're building as a space for us to do meetings on a regular basis. We're not going to vote on that tonight. We want to debate it tonight. I just want to make you aware of it. I will just interject. I personally like it here. I'm just going to stay here. But the offer's been made, something for you to think about. It's amazing. Okay.
You can grab anywhere.
Why we're not having it up school?
There was a lot of scheduling problems there. Summertime can't get in, holidays can't get in. Not infrequently, when they should have been able to get in, they didn't pass the word, and were like trying to get the janitor's attention, like, please unlock the door.
Okay.
This is just much more accessible. Okay, done with those announcements. Next up is our safe officer, Albert Sanchez.
How are you doing? For those of you who don't know me, like you said, I'm Officer Albert Sanchez. And I'm your Beacon Hill Safe Officer. I also have 2 other areas, Alta Vista and 5 Points, just for information. I'm going to start with the community garden in Capital and Gramercy. I got a few calls on that about the vagrants, we'll say, hanging out in the garden, the house that burned across the street, as well as a vacant house to the left of the garden, behind the garden, I think. There was only 3 police calls in the month of August for them, but I received more calls about them and incidents than there was dispatched. So tell everybody, please call. Every time you see them, just call the police. You know, if the police show up enough, I can tell you the officers are gonna get tired of going out there, and the people are gonna get, the vagrants are gonna get tired of the officers. Keep having to go out there and responding to the area and running them off. So there is a lot of calls in this area, but if you just keep calling in, that's gonna help run these individuals off. Kind of on that note, I think some of y'all who live over there know the 2 individuals who kind of hang out there a lot. Please don't hire them. That's just my opinion. I can't tell you, you know, what to do. But in my opinion, I would not hire them. They kind of try to befriend people. This one lady was really upset. She kind of has some stuff missing, and she thinks it's one of those males. Y'all can, I won't say the name, but y'all can kind of know who those males are that hang out over there. On the 19th and 21st, and all these are for August. I got a couple in July, but most of them are for August. Lakewood and West Kings Highway, there was a drive-by, some shots fired. Anybody familiar with that or heard that? The Profate Barbershop was shot at, as well as surrounding businesses. There's really nothing on that yet. It was a basic report that there was a deadly conduct, and they're looking for the suspects. They have, I think, a black SUV is the only thing to go off of right now. Car wash right down the street of Blanco and Gramercy from the barbershop. I've gotten with code. They're supposed to look at that as far as the issues. There was a water leak over there right now. I just went by there. There was some people hanging out.
They're sleeping today.
Yes.
I said they were sleeping today.
Like earlier today or right now?
Yeah, or no, earlier, about a couple of hours ago.
Yeah, I went by. They're on the bikes.
Yeah.
2 guys and a girl. So.
A lot of them have it.
Yeah. So the owner isn't very. I don't know if he's here or not. Sorry, but.
Where is this? At the car wash.
At the car wash at Lake and Gramercy. Kind of hard to work with. So code is kind of. Oh. I'm sorry.
Somebody that's cat. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then 1040 West Craig. It's still an open code case. I talked about it last week or last month. I've been by weekly. I went by right now. There is a bunch of trash outside. Just so if y'all live in that area, it's West Craig, and I think is it Michigan or somewhere around there.
Yes.
Michigan, right?
But yeah, I delivered these letters to you.
Okay, yeah, 1040, it's still an open code case right now. There is a bunch of stuff. I've been by that weekly, and there are workers that are working on the house. Package thefts. There was a couple reported to me on West Rosewood. I got some ring videos of it. I gave that information to property crimes, and they're working on it. I will tell you, it's not in my job description, but you could text me if you want me to go move your package. I drive around enough. This area is small enough that I can get around from helping other people, you know, a little bit further north to down here. I'm here during the day.
I think that deserves a round of
If it's something important, just call me, I'll go move it for you or something. It's not a big deal. It takes, you know, a minute. I have my neighbor do that for myself, so. 1100 West Summit, I think this was towards the end of July. But a female pulled a knife on a man walking his dogs, and a stolen vehicle was recovered nearby. I don't know if anybody posted that on Facebook.
They did.
They did? Okay. I think there's somebody told me. It was just kind of a random thing. She was intoxicated, drinking pie. And then the burglaries are down. There was a lot of burglaries that came out, but they ended up being disturbances, suspicious person. The only main one that's in the area is Chris Madrid's construction site was burglarized and a bunch of tools were taken. You know, if y'all know anything about that or have anybody who has a ring video or some sort of camera nearby, I want to let them know. Other than that, that's all I touched on from a couple of emails. Any questions? comments, concerns? Yes, sir.
So my name's Jerry Lottie. I'm the one that also calls because I got reports of the guys coming out from underneath the house that's for sale. But there's also, this morning, the guys that are putting up the fence there at the linear park said people were over still coming out of the abandoned building, the burned building that's a dangerous structure.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's on the.
It's on camera.
I talked to the code officer about 3 weeks ago, and she said it was still something that was going on as far as giving notice. I don't know where they're at right now, but I can get with her and I'll text her back tomorrow. So.
She does a great job.
Yeah, I just kind of, I just like to kind of push it a little bit, just like people push me out of my. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Okay, have a good evening.
Now we're going to have a presentation from our state representative, Digger Bernal.
Hey, thank you. Hi, guys. We have. All right. So, hi. We'll use this one. I'll just talk really fast. So, I have a super long, really nerdy version of this presentation. I'm going to be really fast. But I thank you very much. And I hate to be the guy to be like, change it. That's awful. But I have to do that. We spent a lot of time, in fact, we lived in Austin for about 5 months in the legislative session, and now we've been going to all the different neighborhoods we represent, about 39 or 40, sort of telling you how we spent our time and some of the things that we did in your name. So I'm going to talk about 3 real quick and then show you 4. The first one, though, isn't legislative at all. It so happened to line up in terms of timing. Less than a year ago, I found out that San Antonio's public housing, but a third of those units didn't have air conditioning at all. They don't have anything. These are buildings that are 10, 15, 20, 30 stories tall. They're made of brick and concrete and wood. And remember who lives there? The elderly, the disabled, veterans, young mothers with their kids. The idea that in a city like ours, in a time like this where well, you can just remember the last 3 weeks we've had, and plus the year prior we had over 30 days or over 100 degrees. The idea that we'd have government overseen, government run, government subsidized housing that we put people in that don't have air conditioning was barbaric to me. And it was something that after hearing it, even though it's not technically a state issue, we just couldn't let go. And so to make a long story short, I called the councilman, we talked to the mayor, we talked to philanthropist Gordon Hartman, because we knew we had to figure this out and get it done before this summer. The last of over 2,200 units that didn't have air AC, we got the last one in at the very beginning of July. And so this was for most of the summer, for the hottest part of the summer, people actually had air conditioning for the first time. Remember, the oldest public housing unit in the country is here in San Antonio. Eleanor Roosevelt visited it as the first lady. So from that time on, and of course some things are built, before it's going to be. What's on Apache?
Sorry?
What's on Apache Coast? Across from Tafoya Middle School. So from that time on, and understandably, they didn't have central air at that time, and then some of these places were built before the advent of sort of modern air conditioning. But then beyond that, there were plenty of buildings that were more modern that had no form of AC. And so even though it's not a state issue, it's something that we spent our time and our political capital on, and it's just sort of important to us that you know that we did that. That's the first thing. The second thing is that one of the bills that we passed, we have 2 access to healthcare bills that we'll talk about before we get to House Bill 3, which is the big school finance bill. One has to do with mammography. So some of you may know this, but mammogram is really a 2-step process. There's a screening mammogram to tell you whether or not you might have something, and the diagnostic mammogram tells you whether you certainly do or do not. Most healthcare plans, including Medicaid, cover the screening mammogram in full. But the diagnostic requires an out-of-pocket expense, starting at around $300 and going all the way up to $1,000. For a lot of women in our community, because of their skin tissue, if they have a history of breast cancer in their family, which is so many, or if they're survivors themselves, their doctors will tell them to skip the screening mammogram and go directly to the diagnostic, which means the diagnostic mammogram is their first mammogram. Does that make sense? Which means that for all those women, they start the mammography process having to pay $300 up to $1,000 or more, which meant for a lot of them, if we know our neighbors, they skipped it, or they waited too long, or they waited till it was too late. And so what our bill did was that it required insurance companies and Medicaid through Texas to cover the diagnostic and the screening in full equally. And that became the law on September 1st. We had filed that bill for, this was our third session filing it. We'd never gotten a hearing. We'd never gotten it to committee or out of committee. And for some reason, I mean, I need reasons I can think of, but for some reason we were able to get it out of the House to the Senate, and it passed out of the Senate with like 10 minutes left before the bell struck. So that's the law on September 1st. That's that one. The other one has to do with kids who are on Medicaid who need hearing aids. It has to do with Medicaid audiology services. In 2014, the Medicaid, this is wonky, but there's no other way to describe it. In 2013 and 14, the Medicaid reimbursement rate for audiology services for kids inverted in such a way where it wiped out access in Bexar County by 92%. That's a complete wipeout. The only people really doing it was Christus. If you were one of these kids and you had to get these services, you could go to Austin or Laredo, but remember, these are kids on Medicaid, they don't have money, and you can't just do it in one trip. It's a multi-trip endeavor, so they weren't getting it done. I was meeting kids who were 12 and 13 years old who needed hearing aids and couldn't get them because there was no one in town to do them, and they didn't have the money to pay for it themselves. Long story short, we figured out that there's a program called SHARS where the schools and the districts are Medicaid providers themselves. And they already have pre-existing contracts with audiologists because kids who are designated as special education have that covered through that program. Our solution was treat all the other kids who are labeled as 504. What that really means is that their only challenge is that they're deaf and hard of hearing, sort of like me needing glasses, same sort of thing. That is their only challenge. Treat all those kids the same as you do these, put them in SHARS that allow the district and the school to act as a Medicaid provider, and then you reopen access for these services that have previously been foreclosed. Does that make sense? Miraculously, that also passed and the governor signed it and became law on September 1st. So now in Bexar County, for all these kids, they have access to these services where they didn't for a long time. So those are two of our big non-education victories, okay? I can talk about all the bad stuff that happened in the legislature. But I thought I'd spend most of my time talking about the big school finance bill, a $12.5 billion school finance bill. You may remember that I am the vice chair on the House Committee of Public Education. It is a House bill, so my name is the second name, which means I won some things and lost a lot. And I'm just going to go over some of the bigger pieces of it as fast as I can. Let's talk about the bad part. It's bad for me. We may not all think it's bad, but I do. And that's this. So it's really over $5 billion in property tax relief. Here's the good part about that. The good part about that is up until this year, the state was only putting in about $37 in every $100 that goes into our public schools. All right, so if this was a public school, the state's only putting in 37, local taxpayers are putting in the rest. It used to be 50-50. The state has slowly been divesting in public ed, forcing you guys to pick up the rest. It's part of why your property taxes have exploded in the way that they have. So it's incumbent upon us to sort of pick up that slack, right? So it would be more fair for us to pick up 50, so it's 50-50 again. Well, we're not at 50-50, but after this bill, we're closer to 44, 46, which is better. I'm okay with that. The $5 billion gets us to 46. The problem I have with this is they're calling it property tax relief, and you're not going to feel any relief. This money saves the average homeowner about $150 a year. If you have a really nice house, not that you guys don't, but a really big sort of Spurs, right, Enron CEO house, you might save $215 to $280. My point is that's not relief. No one's being kept in their home because they've saved $150. Right? No one's getting, the people who are getting taxed out of their houses, this doesn't help them or save them at all. It does allow a bunch of us to run around and say that we cut taxes, which is technically true, right? But if it's only that much, If it's only $150 a year, not that $150 means nothing, I sort of lament what we could have done with this on education, on higher ed, on healthcare, on transportation. We could have done every, white roof in the state. And by the way, as a side note to the councilman, after being through this session and focusing on so much on property tax relief, the white roof program is really the only program keeping people in their homes who otherwise be taxed out. There's no other program by any governmental entity in the state that has that effect, except the white roof program. So we need to figure out what to do that's sort of bigger and bolder, but right now, I challenge any of you to go across any jurisdiction and find something that's doing that, finding vulnerable people and finding a way to save them just enough money to stay in their house. It's the only one that's doing it. So, is it money well spent? Maybe, because we're back up to 46%, but imagine what we could do with it, right? And on top of the fact that it's more than the $4.5 billion going into classrooms themselves. So we're spending more on property tax relief than we are on actual classrooms, but there's still a lot here that's good. So let's go to the next slide, please. Yeah, we just talked about that. All right, let's talk about some of this. One, the basic amount per kid is going up, and we'll talk about poverty in a second, but the basic amount per kid is going up. There is now money for full-day, high-quality pre-K for every qualifying 4-year-old. Is it universal pre-K? It is not. Is it a wildly different place than Texas has ever been? It is absolutely a very different place than Texas has ever been. So we now have full-day, high-quality pre-K. I now think that pre-K for SA can pick up the slack and inch us closer to universal pre-K, because you must all know someone whose income falls just above that poverty line, and they can't send their kids to pre-K. If you take HB3 and pre-K for SA, you can capture more of those families who are just making it. A lot of people believe, I'm one of them, that STAR, the standardized test, is a flawed instrument. So this is a study to determine whether or not it is that. We're incentivizing dual language, which is great. Extended year programs for schools that need it. This is really cool. We're going to pay for the SAT and the ACT for kids who've taken the classes that every college requires them to have. But because so much of the work we're doing would also affect credit recovery and dropout prevention schools, we're also going to pay for the first administration of the GED, or the high school equivalency. And then the next slide, I think, talks about the last bullet point. Let's keep going. All right. These are census tracts. We all live in the city, let's be honest. I'm a Jefferson guy. I went to Jefferson. I went to Brack for a minute. On paper, and I have nothing against Jeff, but on paper, Jefferson, or let's say Holmes, right? You guys know these schools I'm talking about?
That's me.
Okay. No, well, but that's my point. Listen.
Jefferson.
Holmes, I'm including the school I went to. Holmes, Jefferson, and Lanier, on paper, look the same when it comes to poverty, because the measure is free and reduced lunch. If I split this room in half, and this is one campus and it's all free, and this is all reduced, those are actually very, very different campuses. But they're treated the same in terms of the way that we fund the money that those kids need when it comes to poverty. Does that make sense? So we're doing away with that. What we've done is we figured out how to measure the kind of poverty and generational poverty that students actually live in themselves, and then fund them in that way. So it's called a weight, which is an extra amount of money. So the basic weight for poverty went up for everybody. For Holmes, for Churchill, for Reagan, it went up for everybody. And then on top of that, by using census tracts, we're going to be able to employ what's called a spectrum weight, which is to provide even more money for those kids based on the kind of poverty they're living in, to make sure that Churchill gets what it needs, and Holmes gets what it needs, and Jefferson gets what it needs, but also that Lanier significantly gets what they need as well. One of the things we've learned, and the research bears this out, is that if you provide opportunity to kids and they take advantage of it, they do well. So talent is actually distributed evenly, opportunity is not, and you control for that, it gets better. Yes?
How's that quantified? Like, I was Churchill, right? So how would you be able to tell, who's in that generational poverty that is like different from like homes or health careers or anything like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's 4 factors in each census tract that they look for: home ownership, single parent household, whether or not the parents went to college, and there's one other one that's looking, you'll probably remember. in a
Okay,
second.
those are like the.
Yeah, and so then you create four different levels of poverty based on those things. And you figure out not what district they're in and not what campus they're at, because there's choice campuses and there's charter schools, and that just makes it complicated. You figure out where the kid lives, what their life is like, and then you do it that way. That is the most granular that we can get that you can deploy statewide. I'm not telling you that it's perfect, I'm just saying it's better than free and reduced lunch was. Okay, let's keep going, please. Talked about pre-K. Let's keep going. Okay, let's go back. Yes, okay, one, there are raises for teachers. So every teacher should get some raise. Some districts are doing 3%, some districts are doing 7%. The way it's structured is teachers, librarians, nurses, and counselors get a raise. If you've been teaching for 6 years or more, you should get more than people who've been teaching less. It's different per district, because districts are different sizes, and they have different programs, and so we said, you've got to spend at least X amount on teachers, but it's sort of up to you. That's over here. Over here is something that some folks don't like, but I do. Some of the teacher groups are mad at me, that's okay. And it works this way. You figure out, it's first, two caveats. One, it's optional. Two, you don't have to do it, and you don't have to use standardized test scores to measure it. A lot of folks are concerned about that, so you don't have to use the standardized test scores. But a district, SEISD for example, can figure out which of its teachers are the best at growing students. It doesn't mean that they're hitting all their cut scores on the standardized test, but they're the best at getting students to learn rapidly and aggressively. You can then create, let's say, 4 bands of teachers. 0-star, 1-star, 2-star, and 3-star. A 1-star teacher could make $3,000, $4,000 more than their base seniority pay. 2 stars, 6 to 9. 3 stars could be $12,000 more than their base seniority pay. What does that do? It treats teaching like a profession, right? In the way that it hasn't before. It gives it respect and dignity, and it also draws more people into the profession, and they see what can be done. That's part A of this. Part B, let's go back to Lanier or Tafoya where I went, or a school in Canadian Texas, which is hard to keep teachers, much less attract new young talent. In identifying the schools that have high turnover, have a high propensity for failure, where the master teacher versus rookie teacher or new teacher ratio is off, because you shouldn't really ever marry inexperience with need that never works in large amounts. Theoretically, a 3-star teacher who goes to and stays at Lanier could end up making $36,000 more on top of their base seniority pay. So what does that do? It treats teaching like a profession. It attracts people to the profession. It keeps them in the profession. But let's also say that Councilman Trevino is a teacher. And he's been a teacher for 8 years. And he just needs to make more. He wants to, have a family, or he wants to provide something for his mom. You're stuck. If you're stuck at that pay scale that flattens out, you can't do anything. So what does he do? He still wants to stay in education. He becomes a principal or a vice principal, right? What that requires of him is that he leave the classroom, where he's probably needed most and where he's the most skilled. Not that you can be a bad principal, but you understand that you want to keep your best talent in front of students. So what we also are hoping this does is keep our most talented people in the classroom and don't incentivize them to leave the classroom and do something else. These are some of the, I think we're at the end, or the good part. These are some of the highlights of the school finance bill, but it is what I've spent the last 4 years of my life on, trying to find a way to get this into shape that I can pass the House, pass the Senate, get bipartisan support. That property tax relief was some of the compromise that we had to make. But these are the big pieces. Most educators, I'm going to be touring the schools like I always do. I'm going to ask them if they feel it, if it makes a difference, what it looks like. But in the next 2 years, any educator you can ask them if it's making a difference. They should say yes or some. If they say no, let me know. All right? Yes, I'll take questions.
So my mom's a school nurse, and I have tons of friends that are school teachers in public schools, and you said that, I guess, the metrics for this bonus pay or accelerated pay wouldn't necessarily be on standardized testing, correct?
It would not. It's up to the district to decide if they use it as part of the.
That's what I just wanted to confirm.
Yeah.
So it would be up to the district, like the superintendent board, it would not be up to, you know, there's not like, hey, you know, it's basically up to the school.
No, it's a great question.
Yeah.
So, for example, in Dallas, they have a very, very elaborate scheme where they use growth on standardized tests as 10% of their overall metric, but another district could use no standardized test. But to your point, if Canadian Texas wants to do it and Harlandale wants to do it, it can't be that Harlandale has like a 10-prong approach, and this district's like, well, you're my brother-in-law and you're my sister-in-law and we're cousins. They all have to send their plans in to Texas Tech. Because Texas Tech has one of the best teacher preparation programs in the country, and we're using them to normalize it to make sure there's not too much variance between the plans.
So it is filtered through, because obviously, like, the school system is run by the state, not by the federal government. So that is kind of like the check and balance. It's going to be through Texas Tech.
Right, Texas Tech is the designated normalizing agent for the state for these evaluation systems.
Thank you.
Yes?
Is the measurement required to be empirical?
Was that?
Is the measurement system required to be empirical?
For teacher evaluation?
Yeah, well, yes, for the pay.
Well, so for example, using Dallas is sort of the district that's pioneered this. Some of their metrics are test-based, whether it's standardized tests or tests that the kids perform on math tests or national tests. But there's also, if they want, there are also some parts where it's peer review. It's the evaluation you get from your principal, vice principal, or your math or reading coaches, or even some districts are using.
So it's not required to be empirical?
Student evaluation. Well, I mean, it has to be a balance, but it's not all just numbers. So you can take student evaluations and create a metric for them, but we want it to be as open-ended as possible. So for example, again, in Dallas, they use both standardized test scores, locally developed test scores, and then they have some pieces that are based on evaluation. And the evaluations have a ranking system on a scale of 1 to 10, circle X, Y, and Z, but it's still subjective. Yes? Jack?
There are some teachers in the state that should be allowed to increase due to their merits, but there are other teachers that are extremely incompetent by any standard, and yet it appears this program even rewards them.
No. So, a terrible teacher, a 0-star teacher, I'm not saying they're terrible. By the way, you have to be teaching for at least 3 years or more to even qualify for those bands, right? So there is that. But a teacher who, let's say, is a 0-band teacher, a 0-star teacher, they would get their base seniority pay by being in the profession, but they wouldn't even qualify for any of the extra dollars. They couldn't access it. Now, they would get the basic raise that every teacher and nurse and counselor and librarian would get, as the other would get. And if they've been teaching for more than 6 years, they would get that, but they wouldn't get any of the performance pay, if you want to call it that, or the merit pay, or incentive pay, whatever you want to call it. Merit performance, they wouldn't qualify for any of that. They would just get the average increase that they would get for being in the profession for X amount of years, period.
The increase.
All of them are getting increases. Yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
So where, what?
Can you speak for a minute about the teacher mentorship program?
Yeah. So one of the really cool things is, I haven't mentioned this, but we, as the vice chair, we had 5 standalone bills ourselves that we snuck in that were ours. The mentorship program is one of them, so is the GED. That was one of ours. The mentorship program is this. Teacher turnover between the first year and the 4th year is super high. It is super high, and it costs districts a ton. Having a good quality mentorship program increases the likelihood that the teacher will stay in the classroom by double digits, sometimes up to 20% more. And so the mentorship program is designed to take a rookie teacher and match them with a master teacher, and then have them go through more than just checking in over coffee, but to do things like, for example, you watching her teach and you watching him teach. Those sort of activities allows for the real sort of exchange of ideas that keeps them in the classroom. So there's designated money for districts to employ a high quality mentorship program.
So they would employ other people to lead that? I mean, I think that's part of my confusion, is who runs the mentorship program? Because that's not where the teachers trip up, because then
there are guidelines on what the mentorship program should look like, and then the district will say, we're going to follow the guidelines and here's how, and then they get money, and then locally on a campus, you pick the master teacher and the rookie or young teacher, and you do it that way. But the guidelines are set in the statute. Other questions? Yes.
This is already done.
Yes. And it's formula funded, which means that it's not a grant. The money can't run out when we get an infusion of money or we get tax dollars. These things have to be funded first, and then all this discretionary stuff happens. So the only way that these things go away is if we pass a bill to defund it and go through the whole process, which is very hard. Yes.
Looking through this information,
Yes.
on paper, I don't see the initiative that has been proven to increase quality, and that is through the competition of school choice. I don't see that anywhere here, and I was wondering why it could not have been incorporated into this plan.
I don't know how you incorporate school choice into a school finance bill. However, the money does apply to charter schools, for example, and traditional public schools, and in-district charters, and choice schools that are in districts. In other words, they all receive whatever their formula benefit is, they would get it. No one's carved out. So if you're a charter school, if you're STEM Academy at Lee, if you're Jefferson High School, and I don't know, you're a Montessori, right? Whatever your formula funding was, and the money comes in, you all get it. So no one got carved out.
And private schools?
Private schools aren't part of the public school system.
Religious schools?
They're not part of the public school system, Jack. I don't.
Yeah, well, that's why I was talking about school choice.
Well, you're
It's
welcome.
not the same thing at all.
Yeah, I mean, well, to be fair to you, right, not be coy, we had the voucher fight the last 2 sessions, no legs. There's no point in bringing it back up because it wasn't going to work, right? And it's not a Republican Democrat thing. It's out of 150 people, they got 36 votes. So there's no point in just going through the exercise if you know it's dead on arrival. That's just the honest truth, Jeff. Other questions? Okay, you guys, thank you so much for your time. You guys know that we have someone from our office at every one of your meetings. If there's anything that you need to know or that you think we need to know, please let us know. But I really appreciate you giving me the time to go through all this. All right.
Thank you.
All right. And there's some handouts that have some of the highlights of the school finance bill right here. All right. Thank you, guys.
Okay, you always have to spring some surprise on you. Special guest speaker. Thank you guys, appreciate that. I don't have a slideshow, but I really want to thank Representative Bernal for all that he's doing. That is an incredible explanation of something that affects us all. And school finance is going to really impact us for generations. So thank you for all that you're doing on our behalf. I'm here to talk a little bit about this week. We're adopting our budget, and there's a lot of great things in that budget that we're moving forward. And so I'm really, really proud of that. And the representative alluded to part of that. So I want to talk a little bit about housing and basically what it means in our community. Right. So we're approaching about 600 roofs that we have done under the San Antonio Under One Roof program, and I'm really, really proud of that. I want to thank the Neighborhood and Housing Services Department of the city for getting that done. It's a very complex undertaking, but they've pushed that forward, and it's in this year's budget for $5.25 million more for the next fiscal year. And I want to point out that you were using the example of the Nest as a tool that CPS uses, and we're just meeting with CPS Paul Williams today, and you mentioned that the peak power demand is exactly where they want to come in and adjust, right? Because the bottom line is it's the heat, as we know, is really most intense between 2 and 6 o'clock. So that's when they want to come in and adjust your thermostat. Now that's an electronic, mechanical device adjusting system. The way we've done the roofs is to prove that we can layer on a smarter way to save on the peak power demand. We actually did a study with UTSA, Dr. Hassan Rashad Ali, measured every single roof we've installed, at least most of them, I should say, not every single, most of them. And what we found out was that peak demand that we measured before was basically flattened out. Well, why is that? Well, it's because, bottom line, it's like me wearing this dark coat out in the hot sun, or being in a white shirt, like Representative Bernal. We either absorb the heat or we reflect it. And it's as simple sometimes as the kind of color we choose for what we're wearing, right? And so your roof is no different. The roof program that we employed or deployed is to use a high reflectant shingle as we can use. And we call it a white shingle. It's not quite as white as we'd like it to be, but it's as white as a 3-tab shingle is going to get for now. And underneath that, we have a radiant barrier to also help offset that. I'm saying all this because one of the big things that we're going to also push in our UDC next year is to really incentivize more of this sort of high reflectance roofs that can help overall. We've measured every single house that we've done with this program, and the fact is, we're basically saving tons and tons of pollution that goes into the atmosphere because we're not using that energy. And because we're not using that energy, then it means that you actually save money, right? So the way we translate it to the homeowners is we can get into the science of how it works and the physics. Bottom line is, on average, a home saves about $2,000 a year on their utility bill because it's not having to work so hard. And so a combination of more efficient appliances, and of course the great thing that Representative Bernal did to help cool down some of these older buildings. And as he pointed out, a lot of these older buildings did not deploy any kind of technology that helped to sort of mitigate that heat. So now we're asking, as SAFFE goes in and builds new projects, and we're going in and looking at new funding sources to build affordable housing. Affordable housing should not be cheap housing. Affordable housing should just be affordable and economic. And so using technology to help us in every way possible to make a home comfortable and affordable is so critical. And we're setting a great example, I think, with the Under One Roof program, because we're demonstrating that, number one, the roof is the most important element in a house. It's not the foundation. In fact, the foundation is, I think, like number 6. I said it. And so I say that because we can live with a little crack on the foundation, but we can't live with a crack in the roof, right? And then if we're smart about the way the roof can help reduce our energy bills, then we can live more comfortably. We can actually help improve air quality as well. That reminds me that not too far from here is a 78207 zip code. And that zip code, what we know is that zip code experienced the most asthma-related deaths in the city by children. And the worst part of it is that we know that they're preventable, right? We know that these are the kind of deaths that don't need to happen. And they happen because these people live in a situation where they're living with a leaky roof. It creates potential mold issues in the house. It's air quality, right? And so because of that, we worked with the South Texas Asthma Coalition, and we created the asthma strategy for the city, where it's based out of the Frank Garrett Center in the heart of that 78207 zip code. And we're going in, and they are going in and looking at each and every house that has these issues, and we tell them, look, tell them about this roof program, because we can help them. If they're having issues, we can help them just like that, help improve the air quality in that house, help improve stabilized temperatures, lower utility bills at the same time. And it's really working. It's an amazing program. I just wanted to throw a little mention to the Youth Re-Engagement Center that we have at the Frank Garrett Center. It is an amazing, amazing program. In fact, I can tell you that I remember, this was about a year ago, State Representative Bernal gave me a call. Greg Jackson called us from over there. We were talking about Parks and Rec was thinking of reducing some of the youth programs. But I said, hey, we got something coming that might work out a lot better.
And that's what this youth re-engagement program is. Believe it or not, there's about 30,000 kids in our city every single day not going to school. 30,000. It's hard for me to even believe that that number is true, but it's true. And part of what the Youth Re-Engagement Program is about is to help these kids get back on track, get a job, get back to school. So at the heart of the Frank Ayers Center, we've got the Youth Re-Engagement Program and the Asthma Coalition housed there to help the entire city. But I love that it's located at the Frank Ayers Center where we can really help immediately. And so that's in this year's budget too. We're renewing that. It's an incredible program. I want to thank Judge Bull and Rebecca Flores at the City of San Antonio for helping spearhead that. Another great program. I'm going back to housing now. And so in housing, we know that 47% of our city is renters. And I think the number's pretty high here in Beacon Hill as well. But we don't have any programs that actually help represent renters in the city. So we proposed a renters commission, which is going to be going through the governance process. And we feel really good about this because having a renters commission, I think, is going to help us pilot new programs, set some new things in a positive direction. So we're really happy about that. We also included in this year's budget what we call the right to counsel. It's part of the risk mitigation program. If you remember, about this time last year, we increased our risk mitigation fund to about $1 million. And what that risk mitigation fund does is it helps people who are going to be displaced or evicted from their homes to move. Now, it could cost as much as $5,000 to move somebody, to relocate somebody or a family. With the right to counsel, on average, it's about $500 per case, and more often than not, the people get to stay in their homes. And isn't that really what we want to do? We want to help people stay in their homes. So we're going to be piloting that, and we've carved out $100,000 to use to demonstrate what potential benefits there were. I know last year there was 16,000 eviction filings alone. Last year, 16,000. Now, am I saying, we see you, Diego, thank you. And what we know is, that's a lot of eviction filings. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to stop all of these eviction filings and that everybody that there isn't anybody that doesn't deserve to be evicted, but there are people who are being unfairly evicted, and we want them to have a voice, we want them to have access to a way to stay in their homes, for families to stay in their homes. And so we're really proud of that, and I think that this is just a way to sort of try it out and pilot the program. Let me also mention, as I mentioned earlier, that I was meeting with Paul Williams of CPS, and you heard about the urban lighting plan that we did last year. And so now what we're going to do is create an implementation plan. We literally want to go out and do better lighting in our city, right? And neighborhoods all too often have been dealing with the same kind of lighting that goes everywhere. And what we've learned in the urban lighting plan is that there's different kinds of lights, and there's different heights at which those lights should be located. So I'm going to be working with Paul Williams to start doing these smaller projects to demonstrate how this urban lighting plan can actually impact our entire city, improve the quality of life, help every neighborhood, no matter what neighborhood you live in. What we learned in that plan is that the power company picked the height, and then that was it. And it turns out that we should really be thinking about the way the light is placed and how often it's placed, especially in a neighborhood, and especially the kind of light that we're putting in. We're putting in LEDs, but there's a terminology when it comes to LEDs called the color temperature, and so color temperature matters whether you're in a commercial corridor or in a residential area, because in a residential area we have sleep patterns, and we know that having the wrong color temperature can affect your sleep pattern. So we want to have it a little different in neighborhoods. The next thing that I want to talk about is something that I always talk about, and that's sidewalks. And we're really proud of something, because it's taken us this long, but we finally have something that is not even just going district-wide, it's going city-wide. So what we did is I asked the city manager to just suspend UDC 2911. UDC 2911 basically says, guess what? Sidewalks are your issue. If it's broken, if it's not existing, that's your problem. The real problem is that in the inner city, where neighborhoods are the oldest, and they were built before the ordinance that requires development to put in sidewalks, then guess what? You know, how do we recapture that time when there wasn't an ordinance? Well, that's what we're trying to catch up to, right? We have the oldest infrastructure, and in many cases, we don't have it at all. And so that's why I've been pushing for smarter ways to do sidewalks. Now, the real issue for me is that we have limited resources, and those limited resources have to be used in a smarter way. And so we put in, on average, about $20 million a year on sidewalks. And you would say, man, that's a lot of money, and it is, except that it doesn't feel like we're getting a whole lot of sidewalk. And so we piloted a sidewalk repair program in District 1, and I suspended 2911, and I tried it out. And it turns out that we went from a cost of $28 a square foot down to $3.84 a square foot. Now, that's a big difference. It's so big that the city manager has decided to adopt it. So guess what? For the first time ever in the history of the city, we got a sidewalk repair program. And that's a big deal. It's a really big deal. We finally got over that hump. And you all have heard of the pothole patrol, right? Have you all heard of the pothole patrol? No, maybe?
Well, you go put a little gravel and there it's fixed.
Well, it's a group that's in-house that goes in, and if there's a pothole, they fix it, because so instead of going through a procurement process, we just go and fix the pothole. Well, in the same vein, that's what we're going to do with sidewalks. We're going to repair sidewalks, and so much like the pothole patrol, you know, this has a nickname called the Sidewalk Squad, and these are 7 in-house folks from TCI that are going to go out, and they're just going to be fixing sidewalks. And the hope is that we can, with this first group or 7 in-house, that we'll test it out and we'll see how we can grow it so that we can really bring back more and more sidewalks. With just $77,000, we brought back nearly 3 miles of sidewalk. That's a big deal. We're typically doing closer to a mile of sidewalk for about $300,000. And that's very troubling. So yeah, I'll get to you. We'll get to your questions. And so, you know, I think this is one of those things that we want to do as a city, is demonstrate that we're being smart with our dollars and help with infrastructure improvement projects like that one. And before I take some questions, I just want to make sure that we point out that next weekend we have a dial-a trailer at our field office, and you know, you're welcome to come out, and we're going to ask people to come out if there's anything they need done, that they can come out to our field office and do so. Additionally, we have Cindy Cox in the back of it. She's been joining me at a lot of these neighborhood association meetings. She's right there. And she's your representative at Animal Care Services. And she's doing a fantastic job. I'll say this, just so as not to take up too much more time, is that she's in the back. She'll take questions. She's here to meet you and to talk to you about her role on that commission. That I'll take any questions.
So I've seen some of my neighbors that have posted photos of the work that's been done here on Plainfield of the new and improved sidewalks. And people have complained that it doesn't look like the work is completely done. Should I go with Cindy on that? Or
Cindy's Animal Care Services.
Oh, wait, sorry, yeah, so.
But I mean, you can tell, yeah, you can. I don't think she can.
I didn't know. But basically, yeah, there have been, like, and I get like, you know.
So the sidewalk repair program has not come to this neighborhood yet. So we're happy to talk to you about what happened on Blanco. TCI, Transportation Capital Improvements. So yeah, talk to us. You know, so a lot of, when it comes to construction, we know that there can sometimes be some headaches with how it's done. But let's talk about it. Tell me what occurred, and we're happy to see what we can do to help rectify the situation. What I can tell you is the sidewalk repair program actually started in Tobin Hill, and it's been a huge success. We're doing something very, very radical. We're basically building sidewalk, and that's it. And so the idea is to simply do what we say we're going to do. When we start adding all these elements to the project, and I think Blanco is very similar to that project. I know that project from the past, it can be complex, and when we add different elements, it can be very costly. What I want us to be careful about is how we might be able, how we are taking dollars from sidewalks to do other things like streets and so forth.
Statement and question. So there's also a sidewalk rebate program, which I just did, and I'm a big fan of it. So they came in and they covered 50% of the cost to replace my pre-existing sidewalk. I understand it's cost prohibitive for many, but it does exist out there. I believe Daniel's done it as well. So there's at least a couple people here that are evangelists for that program. The other thing I wanted to ask though is, you're talking about the master plan for street lighting. Is there also to do some sort of trial or beta? Is there also a plan to bury utilities? Because I think that's one of the biggest issues that we're experiencing right now. When we go down with the sidewalks on Blanco, it's not a sidewalk issue, it's the fact that the utilities were built on the sidewalk. So there's not a lot that can be done until it's changed.
I'm glad you brought that up. And the utilities were not built on sidewalks. It's that we put sidewalks where the utilities are supposed to go. And see, that's what we've discovered is that by putting the sidewalk where it's supposed to go, we actually save money. And here's what I mean. If you notice, and Blanco's a good example, but Blanco, we didn't have a whole lot of room, if I recall. TCI for many years now has been pushing the sidewalk right up against the curb. Number one, it's not a safe area to be right up against the street, right? But when they do that, and to Jordan Gowie's point, when you do that, you're having to rebuild the curb, you're having to rebuild part of the street, and you're having to sometimes even excavate new driveways, because guess what? The ramp is right where that curb cut meets the street. And so when you cut a sidewalk into a ramp, that's against ADA. So now you're building ramps, curbs, street, retaining walls, and none of that is sidewalk. And that's kind of what I meant by, if we just do sidewalk, we actually can build a lot of sidewalk. And it's as simple as not building it where the power poles are. The power poles were put there in the right of way. Sidewalk should be offset from the street. Guess what? When it's offset, you're not having to rebuild the curb. You're not interrupting the ramp, and we save a lot of money. So I think that's ultimately what we're trying to do. Yes, sir.
And if I could just say, I'm Sadell Brooks. I'm part of Councilman's team as well. I'll have a short update later where I'll be able to circulate around and take your information down to get back to you on a one-on-one basis and answer more questions. Just in case you wanted to go into detail and you wanted to have someone work on you on a one-on-one basis, I'll be able to do that a little bit as well.
Yes, sir.
Will you be proposing a property tax rate cut at the budget decision this week?
There was already a property tax or a homestead exemption that was adopted earlier this year. That's about an average of $28. What I'll say is, to State Representative Bernal's point, it's had an impact of over $3 million to our budget, and it's tough to say that that's relief, but I think that's unfortunately where we are at this point. So we're having to kind of work with a $3 million deficit at this point in the budget because of that. So the answer is we've already done the homestead, but we're not doing anything else in the budget. Any other questions?
Some brief news from some of our committee chairs about upcoming events.
My name is Cassie Lewis. I'm active in the community garden. I'm excited to announce a tree ceremony, a writers group. There are authors from Mexico and the USA. They're a group celebrating their 10th anniversary. They meet in San Antonio every year. And this year they want to plant a tree in our linear park. And so if you know where the community garden is at Capitol and Gramercy, right next door is the playground, and that's where we've recommended that they plant the tree. And the group's going to come to the tree planting ceremony, and they're going to do some poetic readings in Spanish and English. And it's going to be September 28th at noon. And again, it's in the Beacon Hill Linear Park program. And this is really exciting, and they want to do this every year. And they're going to name the tree after an author. And so he says that they'll be kind of celebrity trees, and they'll kind of go down the linear park. Everyone else join us.
And my name is Jerry Lockie. I'm the Heart of the Neighborhood Committee Chair, and want to make sure everyone knows that National Night Out is October 1st. It's going to be from 5:30 to 7:30. It is at Cotton Academy again this year, like it was last year. We really need some volunteers. Ibiza Ascona and Kim Hubling are actually going to be doing the running of the show this year. We request that everyone brings their lawn chairs because last year we discovered there's not a lot of places to sit. We will be having possibly a band or a choir. We haven't quite got the details worked out yet. Hot dogs, beanbag toss, sidewalk chalk gallery for kids. Miss Lucy will have a benevolent fun table for school supplies. Selfie dress-up station that Ibiza has made famous, where you can come do your, get dressed up and do selfies and take pictures. A kids craft table, and we'll have information about Beacon Hill Neighborhood Association. So October 1, 5:30 to 7:30. We need volunteers to help serve hot dogs. We need volunteers to help with the selfie booth and serve drinks. Tell your neighbors. Okay. I'm not sure if we're having an early newsletter, so this is it. The newsletter announcement is the newsletter announcement, so you need to tell your neighbors and look at Facebook and get everybody involved.
Juan Hernandez said he'd step up and do something to see what.
Ramirez, Leslie Ramirez.
Mrs. Eller, did you have anything to add?
No, sir.
Okay. I think I've seen, there aren't any other committee chairs that really I'm missing, right? One thing I'll mention is we do have a movie night coming up. We're in front of the first neighborhood movie nights on October 26th. We procured a projector and a inflatable screen, so hopefully we'll be self-sufficient on this.
What's the movie?
We haven't decided yet. Kind of what we were thinking was we'd come up with maybe a selection of maybe 5 or 6 and throw that out and try to get folks on and narrow that down. If anybody has any ideas on what the movie should be, feel free to tell me later on. Maybe throw that in.
And by the way, this came from the survey, right? You all wrote in that survey, 150 of you mentioned, not 150, 150 of you did the survey, and there was a lot of comments in there that we need to have, that you would like to have a movie night. So we're listening, and this is the type of stuff that we want to hear from the strategic planning meeting. If we're going to say more outdoor activities or more socials, this is where we want you to chime in and say, well, I have kids, I'd really like to have a movie night, or I would like to do a block social. This is where your input is critical to get this done.
What's the movie gonna be?
So not locked down, but we're thinking the lot of the park that's across from where the basketball court is. It's Ellesmere, right?
Yes.
It's Ellesmere at Capitol. We do need to figure out what we're going to do about power. I think the space is probably a good one for that. Based on Sunset, the movie should start about 7:30. Like with National Night Out, bring chairs, bring a picnic out. What else will do?
We all live nearby. We all live pretty close.
Find the closest house.
If you're having kids. Okay. All right. It's an excellent question. I'm sorry.
It is one we hadn't thought about.
I'm thinking kids. I'm sorry.
Bugs to work out.
You're totally right.
Let's get some bathroom
Well, we're going to be literally sort of asking neighbors around there if we can run a really big extension cord, so maybe they'll let us use the bathroom.
Well, if not, there's a generator. If I can get it quiet enough, we might be able to use that as a bathroom.
Right.
Good enough.
Yeah.
Good enough. We need it.
So elections are next month. Last month, we started the process of getting ready for that by appointing a nominations committee whose job is to canvass and try to find candidates for the board positions. They are represented tonight to come and tell us their slate of candidates so far.
Okay, I'll just stand right here. Okay, so according to the BHANA bylaws, the nominating committee is presenting a slate of candidates for the October 2019 board elections. President would be Daniel Humbling. Vice President coming up would be Nicole Bylaws. Secretary Lisa Valley. Treasurer would be Diana Flores. And directors would be Jordan Dowie, Matt Everson, and Michael Clancy, of course. Any of the residents, owner or renter, property owner or business owner in Beacon Hill who has attended at least one general meeting since the last election is qualified to stand in for office. The nominations will continue to be accepted up until October 14th, the October 15th general membership meeting. If you want to present yourself as a candidate, just contact the board secretary, Cynthia Spillman, and her info is on the back of newsletters, and she will add you.
And so, sometimes you feel strange, like, am I nominating myself? That's like I have a big head. This is about stepping up for your civic duty and your community. I mean, this is about you volunteering, not I'm nominating myself because I think I'm great, but because you're willing to step up and do the responsible thing. Contact me if you're interested.
So,
These people here?
not all.
Okay, we're not going to make you talk, but just,
Daniel,
maybe
right there.
just stand up for a second, just so people can.
Here's
start their
in the
faces.
back, here's Diana Flores, she's secretary and treasurer. Are you Matt?
I am Matt Elverson.
Nicole Miles.
Michael's not here. I want to thank the nominating committee, a lot of hard work to round up these names. Thank you very much. Their duty technically is discharged now, but as she mentioned, if you come up, and anybody else tells you they're thinking about being a candidate, more candidates the better. So I'll put their name in. All right, now it's time to revisit the bylaws. Last month, we presented some proposed changes. We had some discussion on the proposals. Some of you may have these comparisons. Left side is the current bylaws, right side is the proposal. Things in pink are what items that would be going away altogether. Things in green are things that were mentioned, new things that were mentioned last month. And things in blue are points that were raised last month and suggestions were made for revising them. The revisions are in there. Yeah, that would be good.
So, as Dan mentioned, I'm Brock Curry, and I was fortunate enough to serve with a group of people to work on the bylaws. I got Rose's name right this month. Last month I got her wrong, so of course she's not here, but it's on the record that I got her name right. I apologize, but this is a group of folks that run the committee. I'm not going to go over all the things we talked about last month. So I want to talk about what's changed since then in response to those comments. There were comments related to donations and how we were going to treat those. We made some changes in a couple of sections. One is in the treasurer's role. The treasurer would maintain a record of all donations that are valued, for in-kind donations that are valued at $100 or more, plus cash donations. and those would be available on request. The one thing that was not in the bylaws that I thought probably should be, because I think since I was treasurer and treasurer's sentence, I think I've always reported at these meetings finances. So we added a reporting requirement, and basically in that reporting requirement, if there are any donations that come in, those it would be talked about that at that point. And then at the end of the document, the new section, you remember we added regarding donations, we simply added cash or in-kind donations that are specifically made in exchange for consideration of some sort are prohibited. Then we talked about clarifying some language regarding board absences. There was discussion about how many votes need to be, does need to be a majority or simple majority or a simple majority. So we clarified that when the board takes action to declare a vacancy, that would be subject just to a majority vote of the board. And then the vacancy would be filled in accordance with a different section of the bylaws that deals with how we elect officers. So that was one of the changes. In addition, we added to recall as a potential cause of absence of the president. We talked about, we listed several different types of reasons that a president could would not be fit to serve, death, resignation, or incapacity. Just felt appropriate to include recall. And then if you're all other non-presidential roles, vacancies would be subject to majority vote of the board to fill. On the recall process, which that's also a new section you may recall from last month, we talked about how many votes would be needed to recall an officer. And we changed that to a supermajority or 2/3 vote to recall an officer after following all the other process. And then again, a successful recall would create a vacancy that would be filled, be addressed in the other section that talks about vacancies. Last month, Jordan brought up the idea of one of possibly having our board meetings, our association meetings on a different time, a different day than Monday night at the regular time. The bylaws call for meetings to be on the second Monday of the month, but if we ever wanted to deviate from that, we needed a provision to do so. So we added a provision that if a regular meeting is going to be rescheduled to a different time, that it would require 30 days notice. And we reworded section 3, just there were two sentences that kind of said the same thing, so we just kind of combined them. That was it. So any questions? I think we're looking to have a vote for approval of these tonight if y'all are ready to do so.
Right, the process is the current bylaws is that we want to change the bylaws. We present the proposed changes at one meeting, and then the following month is when we would vote to ratify or not. So we presented last month, we had some debate on that, questions were raised about certain points, tried to address those points. I'm not going to say right now, are there any other issues you think that need to be dealt with that haven't been dealt with, or this is not the vote yet, but do you feel comfortable moving to a vote?
Yes.
Any last issues anyone wants to raise, and that's fair. We don't, just because we're saying that's all we thought of doesn't mean we're done unless you say we're done, so. Okay.
Is that all of them? Is that all the changes?
That's all the changes since last month. There were a number of changes, and I think they're in the...
they're printed over here.
They're printed over there if you would like to look at those.
And we have those online too on the website.
And there's also a video of the previous meeting on Facebook and on YouTube. It's kind of late now, but...
If you're having trouble sleeping.
Okay, we have a motion to...
Sorry.
Okay. All in favor of accepting the proposed amendments?
Or
All opposed? Signature accepted.
Brock, that's a very difficult job, and I'd like to thank you
Yes.
and your committee.
Appreciate that. I got stuck with making the edits, but that's okay.
Yeah, and
Someone had
actually, I just wanted to make a comment. I was the one who like brought up the whole donation thing, and I really appreciated that it got integrated into the bylaws. And the last meeting, one of the comments when they were going over the survey was that a lot of people felt like some of the decisions were already made by the time you got here. So this is a proof that, you know, you take our voice into account. So I really thank you guys for doing that.
Sure.
Is Ralph Fernandez here?
Yeah.
Is it white man?
I did. I'm glad you know.
Yeah. So next up, we are going to have a presentation about a zoning question at 738 West Hill.
Okay. Normally, you know, our process is that we would present this before the regular meeting at 6:30, and that, you know, applicant would go through ZUD and have a meeting, so we'd be able to really fine tune this by talking to, you know, people who are more familiar with the zoning case. Unfortunately, the city doesn't regularly tell people they need to go through zoning before they come, you know, for a vote. So we haven't had that process. Ralph has not gone to our zoning committee, but he'd like to present you know, an amendment that he would like to do to the property that he has on the corner of Agonier and Hildebrand.
Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Ralph Hernandez. I'm the owner of R. Hernandez Drywall. I've been in business for a little over 20 years, and I've been, like Mark said, on the corner of Hildebrand and Agonier close to 20 years. I had to apply for a rezoning, and I wasn't aware of this, but currently my property is zoned C3NA, Commercial 3NA, and I need to rezone it to C3NAS. The difference being the S, which allows me to store materials. Oh, and I'm a drywall company, I think I mentioned that. So some of my drywall materials outside in the back, of course covered. I've had my materials back there for the 19 plus years that I've been out there, but apparently the city just noticed. And so now I'm having to rezone. So I'm here, anyone has any questions? Apparently, if I do get the zoning C3NAS, I'm allowed to store materials back there. Of course, they have to be enclosed in a garage-type atmosphere. And I also have to have the fencing, which I already have. I have to have the fencing, I don't know what to call it. I guess netted off. It has to, in other words, passerbys can't see.
Like a tarp or something.
Yeah, or metal or whatever I decide, I guess. So that's the big difference. So I'm here to present it, and if anyone has any questions, yes, sir.
The city has a zoning department. The zoning department has professional engineers, individuals who are experts at determining aspects about zoning cases just like yours. Did they have any objections to your proposal, to your knowledge?
None at all. It was the simple fact that I've been there for 20 years, and they all kind of giggled every time I brought that up.
Okay.
But no, they didn't oppose it at all.
Just want to know what the experts thought.
Yeah. Yes.
So what's the process for you at this point? Have you applied? and
Yes,
you're
I've
waiting?
applied.
You're just here as a FYI to us? Like, do you need
that-
anything from us?
The letter of support.
Letter of support.
So I'll make a motion to support the applicant's rezoning of
It's
this.
inappropriate to go that at this time.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I was asking already.
Right now, not this Thursday, but the following Thursday is a zoning 1 o'clock meeting down on
The
South
reason
Side.
we're
That's
having.
why it's so quick.
Yeah, the reason we're having this meeting now is because if it weren't for Mr. Brooks, we wouldn't have known about this case. The things that were sent out by Dominic and people are receiving them today. So we wouldn't have had a chance to meet and get any input going to the zoning committee without doing it right now.
If I could just add really quick, again, my name is Sidell Brooks. I'm Councilman Trevino's Director of Development and City Planning. With this case, C3 is high intensity commercial. It's not changing from C3, that's remaining. The S is a special provision for the outdoor storage. The concerns with that tend to be, if it's not enclosed properly, it can blow away in a storm, or, it can be unsightly to people passing by. But as as Mr. Hernandez was saying, it is going to be enclosed and covered, so those things are basically covered. What I want to ensure is that you all have notice of zoning events as I get them in your neighborhood. So I'm going to continue to notify within a couple days of me getting applications, just so you're aware and can talk about them. And if you have any questions about, what C3 means, what the S means, why we should be concerned about certain things, feel free to reach out to our office. I'm always happy to answer questions. And it's like, why have a job? So,
Okay. We do have some questions. Talk to Dominic, and he's wondering why, a more permanent solution couldn't be, addressed for storage there than what's currently there is kind of, just a flimsy, metal roof over
Carport.
Carport, and something that would be more, permanent in nature. It doesn't really address the reason all this came about too is because the roof that was there blew on top of a garage that was, one of our neighbors' properties, and, need to read a letter that she wrote too. But this wouldn't make any difference. It could still be something that would easily blown off, even more easily, because it's a lot lighter weight. So, is there any way to address that so that you could get something that would be, sturdier and more?
Yes, I mean, and these are questions that are great to ask the applicant as well, because Mr. Hernandez is able to make specifications of things that he can do with the S designation there. So with that, he can make
told
certain.
me just today that like he needs a 30-foot setback.
Yes.
And so he's going to have to go for a variance on that regardless of what happens. What other options does Ralph have that would be more satisfactory than, because he's going to have to put up some sort of barrier. I mean, you've got the pallets out there on the side, all that, is easily seen through the doors. What are you going to have to do with closing that?
Well, it's closed off. There's fencing. I just have to put some sort of netting or something that's high.
But the doors, most of the time I've gone by, the doors are open.
Yeah, it slides open.
Yeah, so are you going to have to keep that closed?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I can raise the question to the case manager and include yourself.
Yeah.
I can see.
Because the case manager wasn't sure. I asked him some questions about that based on feedback from a couple of the neighbors.
Okay.
We did get some feedback. Go ahead.
Well, consequently, sometimes as I've been my purview, I've noticed that to strike that balance with those concerns, conditions can be altered.
Yes, there can be conditions.
By the time
on
this
this.
evening.
What-
Is there any conditions that you all recommend that we be
That's,
employed?
this is like a ZUD meeting as well as a decision-making meeting at the same time, yes.
I have a question. Was this a result, I know it was a while ago, of the freak storm that happened?
That's exactly.
Okay, because I feel like that's very important to know that
That was the evening that it happened.
Yeah, because that was literally one, I mean, not once in a lifetime. That
This
was
is a letter from Rose Cohen Brown, who was on the Bylaws Committee. It says, I am opposed to the request for the change in zoning on this property. They're outside, I'm having a hard time reading right now. Maybe you can read this.
Says their outside storage has never been compliant with our NCD or UDC regulations. The result has been that their non-compliant carport storage unit landed on my garage roof during the violent storm this spring, and they did minor damage to my garage roof when unceremoniously dragging it off my roof from the parking lot behind my house. I was there to witness it all. I never even got an apology from them. So it seems like her concern was in that storm. The roof blew onto her property.
very specific situation.
In the storm, like you were.
I've never heard from her, so I did hear from the neighbor next door, the commercial chiropractor. The carport landed on one of the vehicles. I've paid for all that. I fixed any of the fence that got damaged. So this is the first time I'm hearing that, because I wasn't there. It got there, the next morning my guys pulled it off, brought it back over, and, I took it to them.
Yes.
Two quick questions. First, are you aware of our NCD and what it means?
Yeah, Ralph has been to our ZUD meeting.
I know, but so are you willing to, whatever you do it compliant to the NCD?
Sure.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, are you willing to construct a permanent structure if you're able to get permission to do it?
Yes.
So that it can't be blown away?
Right.
Yeah, right. And that was one of the, things.
And that was one of the
concerned
questions
about. The person that's directly behind him spoke with him too, Mr. Barrera, and he's all for the change. So you've got 1 for, 1 against, and the others haven't got their message, they didn't get their notification until today. We're going to go and we'll canvass the rest of them, but they're not here today.
And I was going to say, you can include that on your letter as well. If you decide to support with that condition and Mr. Hernandez agrees, you can include on the letter that the applicant is
What
willing to
are
make.
possibilities that would be a better outcome for Mr. Hernandez?
As in the conditions?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can't believe he'd be happy with what he's got there right now. If I was the owner of that, it wouldn't, really meet my needs very well. Can Ralph put up something more permanent and maybe a little bit bigger too, and still get a variance for the 30-foot setback so that, he's got something pretty respectable back there?
I would say potentially yes, but to confirm, we'd have to get with the case manager and development services. But you all can request that he build a more permanent roofing structure, and he sounds.
Right, I think what he's saying is, if you do recommend the structure, then maybe the variance will just go through that much quicker.
That's what we're hoping.
Yeah.
And Dominic seems like he'd be pretty amenable to that.
Okay.
At least, he said, I don't see why he doesn't pay because it's a small permitting fee to get a permanent structure back there. And he says, you're a builder, there shouldn't be any problem getting the permit for it. If we could go that direction, I think it'd be better for Ralph.
Let me clarify something with you. What was your name?
Sidell.
Sidell, okay. So NC3 or C3 means that I can't have storage in the back, correct?
I believe so.
Okay. So that's why they wouldn't let me just build a building back there. I first have to go through the zoning and get the S put on my zoning, and then I can build a building, and then I can go that route.
You can build a permanent building.
I'm sorry?
A permanent structure.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Okay, so it looks like there's a need for an official condition here, is that right?
Basically, this is wide open, Jack.
Well, I propose that the official wording from our proposal tonight,
okay,
our We're just offering a proposal, this body is offering a proposal to the powers that be. So, the idea is that we don't, of course, I'm sure Mr. Menendez doesn't want the same catastrophe happening again. So, what's the correct wording that we would use in our proposal that we're voting on tonight, so that those who make this final decision can be directed by our proposal?
Personnel is fairly gotten into his job.
No, it's fine, I've been doing it for
Okay.
years.
Can I interject something else?
Yes.
Not going to certain that, but the hearing is when?
Tuesday next week.
Thursday.
Thursday?
Next
Yeah,
one.
17th.
The 17th.
And when is the next?
Monday.
This coming Monday.
Yeah. Next Monday.
Could we take all of this into the ZUD meeting, and ZUD do what it does, and go with their recommendation?
You need to vote on it though.
Like,
one way or
like
the
we be
other.
voting now to say that, to do what we
Yeah,
trust.
you can do that if you like.
We move this discussion into ZUD, and that the general body commit to agree with whatever the ZUD committee comes up with.
All in favor, all opposed?
Okay.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
That's better than giving us a chance to explore more
I'm sorry that
options.
happened to you.
But it was nice talking to you.
Thank you, Tina.
We'll work it out.
And if you just want to include me on the meeting, I can. Okay, pizza.
7 o'clock. 900 West Wood.
And I say that, then there'll be another 45 minutes. All right, what's that?
And we really need this. And look at this. What
And it's getting
Super quick. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Analicio, Senator Menendez's office. Super quick, just want to reiterate, Representative Bernal brought some information on the proposed constitutional amendments and the election in November. Please look over that. There are links to get a fuller explanation of what these are. Some of these are really, well, all of them are really important. And keep in mind, our Texas Constitution is ever changing. So these would affect the Texas Constitution. A couple of these have to deal with as climate changes, we see more and more flooding in the state of Texas. This is the first time that we have a statewide proposal for flood mitigation. So look at these. San Antonio all the way through Austin is flash flood alley. So we're going to be seeing more of that, and it would be important for our area across and for other communities that we develop those plans. Thank you to all those who attended the town hall on Saturday with Congressman Doggett and Senator Menendez. We had about 185 participants, so thank you for being there. A lot of questions asked, and those who didn't get their questions asked up front, we have your card, and we're going to be responding to those. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, Sadell Brooks again, Councilman Trevino's office. A couple of updates with our office. We do have Dial the Trailer coming up. It's going to be Saturday, September 28th at our Vance Jackson location, 1310 Vance Jackson. What it means basically is you can bring your bulky items and whatnot and bring them to us, and we will get them discarded for you. Again, that's September 28th. And that's going to be from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Our office, so I'm his Director of Development and City Planning, so my job has to do with a lot of the zoning and planning work, HDRC meetings, zoning commission, that type of thing. So if you have questions about those things, you can reach out to me or ask Mr. Spielman, and he can relay my information or whatever works best. Is a Mr. Ralph Galvan here?
No.
Okay, somebody reached out to our office about a SAWS project on Grant. SAWS came back to us and said they don't currently have an active project on Grant, so I don't really have an answer for that. But if you reach out to our office, I can definitely follow up. And then
There happens to be construction on Grant and Magnolia.
yes, I think that's through TCI, but not necessarily through SAWS. And then, yeah, that's really it. If you have any questions, feel free to come see me, or Mr. Stillman also has my information as well.
It's also on the back of every newsletter, by the way.
Perfect, thank you. Good. Maybe, any last points, questions, items?
I forgot to announce that the Lieutenant Governor sent a letter to all 31 senators asking for ideas for interim charges. Those are the issues that they will study for the next year before the legislative session to tee up. We've asked before, if you have any suggestions, please contact our office. You can email us at jose.menendez@senate.texas.gov or call our office 210-733-6604. Thank you.
Okay. Just last reiteration, remind you about the strategic plan meeting. Please come out and help us make it better.
When? 21st.
Saturday, 21st, in that field.
Very good.
In the water.
I almost ate all my chocolate bars.
Thank you.